If there was ever a television show that lived up to its name, it was Gossip Girl, a show that chronicled the lives of a group of rich, beautiful, and extremely messy New Yorkers in their teens and early 20s who people loved to gossip about. And that synopsis applies to both the characters on the show and the cast of the show. And when it comes to the Gossip Girl cast, there's a lot to talk about. The show ended over a decade ago, but the Gossip Girl cast are still making headlines for what they're getting up to in their lives and behind the scenes. When Gossip Girl hit the CW in September 2007, it was an immediate hit, and the cast went from being unknown to extremely famous overnight. And with mega fame came the prying eyes of the media. Gossip Girl was also a CW show, which meant both the network, producers, and writers encouraged the cast to live the same lives as the characters they played on TV. But the Gossip Girl actors didn't need much persuading, as they not only partied like their show counterparts, but they also fought, schemed, and dated like them too, with many of the cast dating each other, feuding with each other, cheating on each other, and getting wrapped up in all kinds of messy Hollywood dynamics, businesses, and relationships. The cast antics, infighting, feuds, and controversies became as famous as the show itself, and the on-set drama was so juicy and talked about that at one point there was even a main cast member allegedly sharing other cast members' secrets and what was going on behind the scenes with the media. There have also been some extremely horrendous allegations against certain cast members, with certain actors being accused of monstrous behavior. And while Gossip Girl's massive success meant a lot of the cast antics spilled into the public eye, more than a few stories did remain behind closed doors over the years. But we'll be getting into all the behind-the-scenes stories, along with what the Gossip Girl stars have been up to after the show ended. The good, the bad, and the messy. And also revealing the one main cast member that decided she was going to take the show's storylines a little too literally, becoming a real-life Gossip Girl herself. Every episode of Gossip Girl starts and ends with voiceover narration by Gossip Girl herself that's voiced by Kristen Bell.
You know you love me. XOXO, Gossip Girl.
And the mystery of who Gossip Girl is stretches the entire 6 seasons of the show. In the series finale, spoiler alert if you don't want to know who Gossip Girl is, Gossip Girl is unmasked and revealed to be Dan Humphrey, who is played by Penn Badgley, which both fans and the cast of the show agree made absolutely no sense at all and showed how far off the rails this show had gone. But season 1 of Gossip Girl, the only thing off the rails was the cast. And just the same as Gossip Girl being a source of fascination for the characters, the cast of Gossip Girl was a source of fascination for fans and the general public when the show was airing on the CW. The show is set in New York City on the Upper East Side and follows a group of teenagers whose scandals are documented by the aforementioned anonymous Gossip Girl. The teenagers in the beginning all attend 2 different fictional private schools, Constance Billard and St. Jude's, and later the characters go to university. The cast is primarily made up of Blake Lively as Serena Vanderwoodson, Leighton Meester as Blair Waldorf, Penn Badgley as Dan Humphrey, Chace Crawford as Nate Archibald, Ed Westwick as Chuck Bass, and Taylor Momsen as Jenny Humphrey for the first 4 seasons, Jessica Schwartz as Vanessa Abrams, also just for seasons 1 through 4. Michelle Trachtenberg was on the show as Georgina Sparks, and although she wasn't in every episode or the vast majority of episodes, she was on the show for the entire run and played the main kind of villain antagonist. And then, as I already mentioned, famously, Kristen Bell did the voice or voiceover of the entity of Gossip Girl. When Blake Lively was cast as Serena Vanderwoodson, Woodson, she actually turned the role down initially because she said she wanted to go to college. She'd only done 3 roles prior to Gossip Girl, but her first ever role was a lead role in The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants that came out in 2005, and that movie was pretty popular and really put her on the map, especially considering it was her first thing ever. Gossip Girl's creators and producers initially told Blake that after the first season, things would die down with the show and she could go to Columbia part-time. They promised that this would happen, but they just couldn't put it in writing. Spoiler alert, she didn't go to Columbia, things didn't die down, and there's a reason they didn't put anything in writing. I don't find it surprising that the producers told her this because, of course, typical Hollywood bullshit, they're going to tell her whatever to try and get her to sign. But I do find it kind of surprising that Blake Lively didn't realize this because of her being from a acting family and being also pretty wealthy, that she'd be able to hopefully have a good team around her. I do think that the producers were just saying whatever they could because while they couldn't know for sure that Gossip Girl was going to be really, really successful, they probably had a pretty good understanding that it was going to be at least somewhat successful because, one, the show was based on a popular book series, so there was a basic built-in audience. But more importantly, at this time, these type of teen shows were incredibly popular, and the creators and producers absolutely knew this because when they were casting Gossip Girl, they were filming the last season of their wildly popular teen show, which was basically the original California version of Gossip Girl, The OC. The OC was an absolute phenomenon, and let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree with this, but if I had to pick which one was more popular between Gossip Girl and the OC, I would say it was the OC, at least like first season comparisons. That could also be because the OC came out like the year I moved to the US and I was 16, and my friends and I would literally have like sleepovers during the second season to watch new episodes, and Gossip Girl came out my freshman year in college. Loved both of them, but the OC, it just seemed much bigger, but it could be because I was in high school at the time. So Blake didn't end up going to Columbia in season 2, and towards the final few seasons of Gossip Girl, especially the last year, she did try and exit the show, but she ended up staying until the end of its run after 6 seasons. The rest of casting on the show went pretty smoothly, but that is where things running smoothly ends when it comes to Gossip Girl. Almost immediately, there were issues on the set of Gossip Girl. The show was a hit overnight and the cast became extremely famous, so there was a lot of fascination of what was going on behind the scenes. And that just grew and grew whenever people realized it wasn't running smoothly at all, and there was a lot of drama with the cast. Lots of allegations surfaced of certain cast members causing huge issues, having tantrums, not knowing their lines, holding up production. There were substance use problems with many cast members, rumors of feuds between multiple cast members, and more than one romantic relationship between the cast. In short, what was going on behind the scenes of Gossip Girl wasn't too dissimilar to what was going on the show itself. As I mentioned before, Blake Lively initially, when being cast, didn't really want to be on the show, and pretty much all of the main cast members didn't want to be on the show a few seasons in, but that's getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Someone else who didn't want to be on the show practically from the outset was Taylor Momsen. She played Jenny Humphrey, and Gossip Girl started with Jenny as our kind of introductory introductory character. She was how the audience enters this rich, beautiful world. Taylor Momsen was only 12 when she was cast on Gossip Girl and 13 and 14 through the show's first season, with everyone else on the cast being 20, 21, 22. She was a child actor and appeared in films like How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Spy Kids 2. But this was a totally different experience. One, it was a CW show aimed at late teens and young adults, and two, it brought with it a crazy level of fame.
It was always weird for me being young and suddenly kind of overnight being tabloid famous, which is a different kind of famous, where suddenly they're out, the paparazzi's outside your house and they're following you and they're following me taking my sister to school and like just weird, you know, it's weird. And they would photograph me on set, like as everyone on set, because we filmed in the streets of New York, as my character, and put it in the tabloids as Taylor Momsen.
Right.
And say Taylor Momsen's wearing this and Taylor Momsen's blah, blah, blah. And that started to really bug me because my identity was getting kind of taken over, I guess.
Yeah. Television, playing a character, it's so different from when you're playing a role in a film.
Oh, 100%.
Because your identities aren't collapsed in the same way. And
Taylor didn't want to be on the show because she didn't want to act at all. She wanted to be a musician, and today that is actually what she's doing. In fact, Gossip Girl was her last acting job she ever did, and she ended up by season 4 majorly tapering down her appearance on the show and leaving it all together at the end of that 4th season, with her only returning for the series finale in season 6.
It was a childhood thing that, you know, I got put into. I was 2 years old. I wasn't making my own choices then. And literally as soon as I got to an age where I could make my own decision, it was like a click. I don't know exactly what happened, but it's like I woke up one morning and went, wait a second. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this other job. I can just play in my band and I can tour and write songs. That's all. I can just do that.
Taylor's exit from the show wasn't just about her not wanting to act. A lot of it had to do with her on-set behavior, her issues with her co-stars, and her behavior when it came to the actual acting, learning lines, turning up on time, and turning up to set at all. There were frequent times that she would be extremely late to set or even not show up at all. And when that happens, the scripts would be really hastily rewritten to explain her character's absence. A lot of actors, both series regulars and those guest starring on Gossip Girl, had problems working with Taylor as she would never learn her lines, and filming scenes with her would take a painstaking amount of time. She also would hold up production by being extremely late, and as the show went on, as I said, she just wouldn't turn up at all. I've spoken in other videos before about what a nightmare this can be when cast create these difficulties with not being on time or not showing up, because it's not just the people that you're thinking of, like other actors in the scenes. There are hundreds of people that you are holding up with all of the crew, everybody working on that scene, and all of the people that are going to be working on the next scene. These productions, especially CW shows, they're running on such a tight schedule. And one thing that I don't think is understood a lot by the general public is just how many people work on these sets. And so one actor being late can have such huge repercussions. And every single time that production's held up, they might as well just be burning money because everyone is just standing around waiting for that person to come to set. There was also a lot of talk at the time that Gossip Girl was being filmed about Momsen's tensions with both Blake Lively and Leighton Meester, but it seems like there were tensions with all of the cast and crew because of the environment. A lot of people used to be quite harsh to Taylor Momsen about not socializing with the rest of the cast, but I think that's pretty understandable, even forgetting for a minute that there were issues because of her behavior, but she was in her very early teens shooting the show, and the rest of the cast were in their early to mid-20s. Momsen's on-set behavior started to be discussed in the mainstream when guest stars from the show, like Tim Gunn, started talking openly about how difficult it was to film with Momsen and how poorly she had behaved on set. Things soon became untenable for Gossip Girl producers and the CW, and they knew they couldn't continue. CW shows are kind of a rule unto themselves, and their producers and network executives, unlike other networks, they are pretty big fans of their cast getting in real life messy drama, and they love when these things are being reported in the press. They love when the co-stars date each other. The CW writers even love to incorporate the real cast drama into the writing, and there's many CW stars who have discussed the fact that they have had their very personal problems, some of which were public and some of which weren't, written into the show they were on. But while the CW loves their cast making tabloid and gossip site fodder, you better not mess with the money. And Taylor Momsen was costing the show a lot of money. So the producers knew that this just couldn't continue. By season 3, Taylor Momsen was even less interested in the show and wanted to focus on her music career. So the show's producers and Momsen came to an agreement. The producers wouldn't let her out of her contract and they wouldn't fire her, but they would write her out of the show as long as she agreed to not act in any other projects, which that of course was fine by Momsen as she didn't want to act.
They went, well, we can't let you out of your deal, but we can write you out of the show so you can go on tour. You can't act in anything else. And I went, that's fine. That's not what I'm trying to do. Yeah, I can't, exactly. They're like, but if you're not in the episode, if we don't write you in the episode, you're not in the episode.
Right.
And so that's, they really allowed me to follow my dream. And
that's beautiful.
And so I'm forever grateful and thankful to them for that.
So by the time season 4 came, she only was obligated to do 4 episodes. And in season 5, she didn't appear at all, with the audience being rather infamously told her character had gone to London to go to fashion school. And the deal that I mentioned with producers, that allowed her to return just for the series finale, which happened in season 6. When returning for the finale, she did get a trade-off too, as one of her songs, Kill Me, was featured in the series finale. Along with her music appearing in the Gossip Girl series finale, it did also appear in other CW shows such as The Vampire Diaries. Today, Momsen is still the frontwoman of the band The Pretty Reckless, which is the band she was a part of when her songs were featured on Gossip Girl and The Vampire Diaries. As I mentioned, she hasn't acted since Gossip Girl and seemingly has no intentions to. In the past few years, she has spoken more about Gossip Girl and her exit from the show, her mental health at the time, and her music. 2 other things that were of major concern when Momsen was on Gossip Girl and for several years after that were her alleged substance use and her relationship with certain people in the music industry, one of which was Marilyn Manson. Even while filming Gossip Girl, there was a lot of discussion about Momsen's on-set behavior being linked to her substance use, as the Gossip Girl set was widely known for having quite a lot of cast members who were struggling with this. The others we'll discuss in a minute, but there was major concern for Momsen due to her very young age. There was definitely a lot of pressure on her at that time because there was so many people discussing her and her well-being and what she was doing, what she wasn't doing. There was a lot of pictures and videos and paparazzi shots that were always circulating about her and people just discussing her in general and her mental health and what she was doing. And she was also surrounded by a lot of older people in the music industry. So it's kind of no wonder that she went through all these struggles with such a microscope on her and so many people making allegations about what was going on with her. As I said, she was on Penn Badgley's podcast last year, so hopefully she is in a better place today than when she was on the show. There's not really a good resolution to come to when it comes to Taylor Momsen, as ultimately it seems like her parents forced her into acting. She got enormous fame and money at a very young age for something she didn't really want to do, with a lot of eyes on her at all times, which that's kind of a recipe for disaster. But at the same time, she did make things very difficult for everyone just trying to work and do their job on the set of Gossip Girl. If you haven't seen Gossip Girl, I will give you a few little tiny bits of information that you might need for context. But if you haven't seen it and you don't want to put yourself through the whole show, I highly recommend Mike's Mike, his series about it. I'm sure most people have heard of him. He's a really well-known YouTuber. And also Friendly Space Ninja has a great video about Gossip Girl. Season 1 is great of Gossip Girl. That's worth watching. But honestly, it takes a very sharp decline after season 1, which is down to a lot of things, but a big one being that Josh Schwartz, the creator and showrunner, the guy who made the OC, he actually left. When Josh Schwartz left, the new showrunner and the new producers, they started making a lot of decisions based on what was really popular with fans rather than what made a good story. And while of course it is important to listen to fans and to take their feedback on board, you can turn your show into a bit of a mess trying to appease to every fan, and sometimes the vocal minority don't have the best ideas, especially when it was a show that hadn't been on for longer than a year, and so much of that show was the writing and the characters in season 1, and they just changed pretty much everything from season 2 onwards. One of the major changes after season 1 was to the character of Chuck Bass, played by Ed Westwick. In the pilot, Chuck Bass is horrendous. He assaults not one, but 2 of the main female cast members, Blair and Jenny, and he does some truly heinous things throughout the series. Chuck Bass is truly the epitome of spoiled, selfish, rich asshole, but fans absolutely loved the character, mainly because of Ed Westwick's performance. With season 2, Chuck pretty much becomes somewhat of the lead character of the show, but the writers also decide in season 2 that they want to try and redeem Chuck Bass despite all the things that I've mentioned and a plethora of other abhorrent things. Additionally, the character of Nate Archibald, who was Chuck Bass's best friend, he was also a fan favorite. And if you haven't seen the show, but you're seeing the clips that I'm showing on the screen right now, you're probably going to get a hint as to why he was a fan favorite, because he was played by a beautiful man named Chace Crawford. Even as a lesbian, I could say that this is a beautiful man. That wasn't the only reason though, as Nate Archibald was really the only character that was in any way a decent person in the series. So Chace Crawford and Ed Westwick were playing these 2 very popular characters. They were young actors on a wildly successful show living in New York, and they spent a lot of their time enjoying the New York nightlife when they were filming the show, especially at the height of the show's popularity in the early years. It seemed honestly like every day for a while in the early years there was a story from people partying with Ed Westwick and Chace Crawford. Westwick and Crawford were also at one point roommates in the earlier seasons of the show, and there were a lot of stories that came out about their parties that they used to throw at their apartment that was on 10th Avenue and 26th Street in Chelsea. They frequently would have guests like Lindsay Lohan over for rooftop parties, and this was all 2007 to like 2010, 2011. So it was really at the height of all of this Lindsay Lohan and teens and prior to social media. Ed Westwick also dated Jessica Schwartz, who played Vanessa on the show, relationship and the messiness of it. Jessica show, and they had a on and off relationship for years. Their relationship was always allegedly very messy, and there have been a lot of people associated and involved with the show who spoke about substance use playing a role in their relationship and the messiness of it. Jessica Soar left the show at the same time Taylor Momsen did at the end of season 4. Unlike Momsen, Jessica's character, Vanessa, was not very well received by fans, and she got a lot of backlash in regards to that. Also, similar to Momsen, her character wasn't very involved in the show by the time she did leave in season 4, and she hadn't really had any significant storylines for quite a while. Of course, when Jessica Soar left Gossip Girl, there was the usual bullshit PR statement of, oh, I discussed with the producers and we decided the character had ran its course, so I'm leaving, which in a CW show, no character or no CW show for that matter ever runs its course. It's just dragged out to the end of time if possible, and characters just kind of putter around with no clear direction. Her character hadn't had any direction for years either, so I don't know why it made a difference at the end of season 4. Jessica and Taylor Momsen's exits from the show came about allegedly because things were really coming to a head on the set of Gossip Girl, and there were a lot of tensions on the set at this time. At the time, which was 2010, 2011, when season 4 is filming and airing, there were many issues between cast members. Blake Lively and Leighton Meester allegedly had a feud, which we will get into later. Chace and Ed Westwick were rumored to have a falling out, but then things seemingly were fine after a while. And there was also the drama of Ed Westwick and Jessica Soar breaking up and constantly having issues and fights and getting back together. And then on top of it was Taylor Momsen's behavior and being late and not knowing her lines, which created even more issues on the set and between the majority of the cast, with even the crew having some issues due to things like lateness. A lot of this information that I'm discussing is widely known, and there are countless stories about issues on the Gossip Girl set because the Gossip Girl set allegedly had its own Gossip Girl who would sometimes tip off outlets about feuding co-stars and other things that were going on behind the scenes. See if you can guess who that Gossip Girl cast member was, and I'll reveal who it was at the end of the video. Chace Crawford, while he was on the show, developed a friendship with a group that is known in Hollywood as the Podwall Group, and I've spoken about this group in my Nickelodeon video. That group is honestly a video in itself, maybe even a series, but honestly maybe a Patreon video, to be honest. The group has a lot of members, but Chace Crawford seemed to be the closest with JC Chazé, who they also lived together at one point, and also people like Matthew Morrison from Glee, who I've done a Glee video before, and Sean Pyfrom, who was in Desperate Housewives, which I just did a video on that show too. Outside of stories about lots of partying, you don't hear too much about Chace Crawford in the mainstream media, apart from all of the paparazzi walks he does, as he is the king of doing stage paparazzi shots, especially with random products that are perfectly having their labels face the camera that he definitely hasn't been paid for, but that's not the worst thing in the world, is it? Outside of the mainstream media, there is, as I said, a lot of discussion about Chace and Jay-Z and that whole group. And Chace is also a pretty big blind item celebrity. But of course, blinds, it's difficult to say because some are absolutely true and some are absolutely false. Today, Chace is on one of the best shows on TV, The Boys, which one of my absolute favorite shows, and I highly recommend. Up until 2017, Ed Westwick was mainly known for his partying, and he was still primarily known for Gossip Girl, his biggest role by far. But in November 2017, not too long after the Me Too movement, Ed Westwick was accused of by multiple women. To be crystal clear, everything that I'm going to discuss here is alleged. Westwick was not found guilty of any of these accusations, nor was he charged. On top of the specific allegations that we're going to discuss now, there were other women that in 2017, 2018, and 2019 that came forward with allegations against Westwick, but in those cases, it was not possible to pursue charges due to the statute of limitations being up in regards to those incidents. But the first accusations against Westwick were put forward on November 6, 2017 by Christina Cohen. Christina Cohen is an actress, and she first accused Westwick of in a Facebook post. She claimed that in 2014, she was at Westwick's house with her then boyfriend, who was a producer, and she was feeling uncomfortable after Westwick propositioned her and her partner for a threesome. She wanted to leave, but her boyfriend, who was a producer, didn't want to be rude to Westwick, so allegedly she said that she would stay while her boyfriend tried to smooth things over with him. She alleged that she went to sleep in a guest room and she woke up to Westwick assaulting her. Cohen stated that she was pressured by her boyfriend after the incident to not come forward because of Westwick being famous and the boyfriend being a producer, and how this would also affect his career and her career as an actress. The second accusation came from Orly Wynn, also in November 2017, and she spoke out a few days after Christina Cohen. She came forward with a very similar allegation against Westwick and claimed that in 2014, Westwick had attacked her at his home after a gathering. Wynn said that she then told her boyfriend, who was also an actor, about the incident, but her boyfriend dismissed her claims. A third woman also in November 2017 came forward about Westwick. Rachel Eck, who was a former creative producer, alleged that Westwick tried to forcibly kiss and grope her at a Hollywood hotel in 2014. She claimed that the incident occurred late at night when she was waiting for her boyfriend at the hotel. Westwick responded to all of the allegations and denied all of them, stating that he had never forced himself on anyone, and he claimed that he didn't even know Christina Cohen and said he would work with authorities to clear his name. The Los Angeles Police Department opened an investigation into the accusations in late 2017, but in July 2018, prosecutors announced that Westwick would not face charges due to insufficient evidence. And of course, it's important to remember that so many sexual cases don't even make it to being reported, and a lot of other ones are not charged because of insufficient evidence, because it is something so difficult to have evidence for. And also, even if it is reported, even if someone is charged and makes it to court, it is incredibly, incredibly rare that someone will actually be found guilty and then actually have some sort of consequences. And of course, so many sexual assaults don't even get reported in the first place. Due to the allegations, Westwick was removed from the BBC series Ordeal by Innocence, and his scenes were reshot with another actor. He was also dropped from the series White Gold during the investigation. After the case was closed, he did slowly return to acting, but has not done anything anywhere close to Gossip Girl and the fame he achieved through that show. He did go away from social media for 2 years when all of these allegations were coming out, but after 2 years, he returned to social media just like nothing happened, and he started doing a lot of TikToks and kind of really playing into his character and Gossip Girl. And of course, younger people are always discovering the show, and it's on Netflix and things like that, so people are always rewatching it, and now a whole new audience of people are finding him on TikTok and following him, and he does do a lot of content centered around Gossip Girl. Leighton Meester and Penn Badgley were always seemingly the most drama-free cast members of Gossip Girl. They have also gone on to both be pretty well liked in the industry. You never really hear about them causing any issues, and they both have gone on to live lives that they seem to want to live and on their terms, while also being successful, which, let me tell you, is not easy in Hollywood. It is not easy mainly because of the way the industry is, and because it is full of scummy people, cutthroat people, people that will make your life difficult and so on. But it's also hard to have a successful career and maintain a somewhat private life doing what you want, because most people in the industry get completely corrupted by the money and fame. I'm not saying either of them are perfect angels or have a perfect life. I'm sure, like everyone, they have ups and downs and flaws and fights. But for Hollywood actors, they both seem more interested in actually doing their jobs rather than creating headlines and getting famous for being famous. I've mentioned this before, but if you look at something like billionaires, most of them are horrendous people because you can't get to that level of wealth without being a ruthless prick who stands on people and backstabs people. And in that same way, the vast majority of Hollywood actors aren't that great or even really halfway decent people. Some of these actors might start out as regular people, like Leighton Meester actually had a very difficult upbringing. But when you're not only given huge amounts of money, power, and fame, but also an army of people doing everything for you, you don't have to wait in line, do errands, do any sort of regular people things. And on top of that, you're told every single day by millions of people, you're perfect, you never do anything wrong. And even if you do something wrong, a lot of the time, fans will make excuses for you or blatantly just not even care what you did. That sort of situation is going to corrupt most people. But Leighton Meester and Penn Badgley seemingly were the easiest of the Gossip Girl cast to work with. They also have both gone on to pretty unproblematic careers. And most fans of Gossip Girl agree that they both were the most talented actors on the show too. Leighton Meester did have a very difficult childhood, and she did end up in court with her mother, as her mother was trying to get her to be financially responsible for her brother, who suffers from a pretty serious health condition. And of course, the mother lost. And it was something that I don't really think it's appropriate to sort of go into a lot of like childhood stuff and with the brother and things. He's like not a public figure, but there are plenty of articles on the legal aspects of all of that. But Leighton Meester also went through a lot with her parents because her mom and her don't speak, and her mom is speaking to the press, not so much anymore, but she did when all of this legal stuff was going on. And it came out through all of this that Leighton Meester was actually born in prison when her parents were locked up for dealing substances. She does have two siblings, and as I said, one has a pretty serious health condition. And when Leighton was a child, she seems to have been parentified and took on a lot of responsibilities in her family, one of which was the financial responsibility, as at a young age, she started working to support her family financially. Leighton moved to New York when she was 11 from Texas and started modeling, and 2 years later, she started appearing on television, with her first role being in Law and Order. From 1999 to 2006, she appeared in various TV shows, and some of them were even on her future home of the CW. She was in shows like Veronica Mars and Seventh Heaven. When Leighton was cast in Gossip Girl in 2007, it definitely was her big break as a regular on a TV show. But with Gossip Girl going on to be such a huge show, Leighton really hit the jackpot with that. As I said, she and Penn were always lauded by fans as the most talented, but while Penn's character of Dan wasn't really that well liked by later seasons of the show, and honestly it became an even bigger mess when he was revealed to be Gossip Girl, as that kind of tainted people's rewatch of the show because it didn't make sense. But Leighton's character of Blair Waldorf was really adored, and being in my late teens and early 20s when the show came out, I'd absolutely say that while yes, Blake Lively was promoted as the star, but I think the vast majority of people seemed far more interested in Blair and Leighton Meester. As is usually the case with these big shows, especially CW ones, where there's multiple female leads, Leighton and Blake were pitted against each other right from the start. But there was also this avalanche of reports from the set that they had this feud and really didn't get along. Their feud was talked about constantly, and while it seems as though they definitely didn't get on, it seems like it was much more a case of two people who were not similar, didn't have a lot in common, came from very different backgrounds, and we're just co-workers. A lot of the time, fans of the show want the real life actors to have the same friendships and relationships that they do on screen. And this is especially true for TV because it isn't just an hour and a half movie in a movie theater, which, don't get me wrong, like people feel very passionately about movie characters and relationships, but TV, in my opinion, just has this other level to it. And some of that might be because I feel so strongly about TV. I mean, I've literally made my life talking about TV pretty much, but you are with these characters for years and years. And you know the characters so well. You see their ups and downs and breakups and makeups, their best moments and their worst, and you invite them into your home week after week for years. And if it's your favorite show or your comfort show, you watch it again and again and again. Any girlies with anxiety and or ADHD, let me know in the comments what is the show you watch over and over and over and over again or to fall asleep to. People feel really passionately about TV characters and their relationships, and this is especially true for CW, WB type shows as they're aimed at younger fans, and younger fans are some of the most loyal fans you can have. The CW absolutely knows this. They know how to get people interested and talking about those shows, as they aren't one of the big three main networks. As I mentioned earlier, the CW loves when the cast date each other. They love writing in their cast's real life personal dramas into the show, and they also know the cast being best friends is something that generates a lot of discussion. But what generates even more buzz and articles is when cast don't get along. You only need to look up anything about Gossip Girl, and every single article and video practically talks about this feud between Blake Lively and Leighton Meester. I'm sure there was a lot of jealousy and petty behavior, considering they were all 19, 20, 21 through the first seasons, under a microscope, lots of money, and all the other things that come with it.
Yeah, there was an article recently saying that Leighton and I were frenemies. Friends, but we're also enemies. And they see our characters on the show, and they want that to be true in a sense. And it's really strange because they always want to pit women against each other. You don't hear about, like, Penn and Chace hating each other, but, you know, we all do get along very well. And it's upsetting that they have to do that to try to sell magazines.
Although the feud aspect was discussed a lot in the media and printed a lot in magazines, there does seem to be a lot of reports from the set, from people who worked on the show and crew and other minor actors, that said it was much more two people who just weren't friends, were never going to be friends, and were co-workers and really nothing more. Especially by the end of Gossip Girl's run, a lot of the cast were very, very checked out from the show. I've talked before a little bit about TV contracts, especially in some of my WB CW videos, because the CW is known for getting young unknown actors and locking them into these contracts for many years. And you get to this stage where the actors really want out of the show, especially because a lot of them sign these contracts when they're young and unknown, but they have to see it through until the end of the contract. The CW usually signs actors to a 6-year deal. Occasionally, lately, I've heard that they're even doing 7 years. In California, they can't really do anything longer than 7. I know a lot of their shows film outside California, but I'm not sure where they use as like their base for the contracts. It is why many CW shows, including Gossip Girl, end after 6 seasons. There are, of course, exceptions. Supernatural ran for like 15 years, I think, but a lot of it hinges on the actors and if they're willing to renegotiate or sign on for longer, because a lot of these CW shows, if they're still getting decent numbers and the actors are willing to stay on, they'll just still keep pumping out the show. So some of these CW actors, they'll sign on for a show and it will become really popular, but they might want to leave the show after the 3rd season, but they're locked in for 6. So by the time it gets to the 5th or 6th season, they are really unhappy and pretty much checked out of the show. It'll come to the point where the actors literally are not even really aware of what is happening on the show. They just know, I need to come in today at this time, stand on my mark, say my lines, and I'm out. And the second that they're done, it's erased from their mind. Like they couldn't even tell you what's happening on the show. Some actors work like this in general, but by the end of Gossip Girl, this was allegedly the case for pretty much the whole cast. It was come in, hit your mark, find your light, say your lines, go home. So honestly, now when people are going to the people like Michelle Trachtenberg and the rest of the Gossip Girl cast and asking them to make statements about everything going on at the moment with Blake Lively, it's no wonder they're replying with, what the fuck, why would I do that? They work together as nothing more than co-workers in their late teens and early 20s, nearly 20 years ago. Why would they make a statement? They have absolutely nothing to gain from that and a lot to lose, because at the moment, there's nothing that you can say in that situation that isn't going to have a lot of people coming after you. The Gossip Girl cast are around my age, like a year or 2 older than me, and I can think of a lot of my friends that if you went and spoke to their coworkers from their job when they were 19, 20, you might get a completely different opinion of them than if you spoke to their coworkers today. If you spoke to my coworkers from my teens and early 20s when I worked at like American Eagle and a bar, they'd still tell you I was obsessive about my work and working crazy hours. But a lot of people, the way they behave at work can be totally different today than it was 20 years ago. And a lot of that depends on the type of person and their life and experience. And I've had a job since I was like 13. I'm the oldest, and lots of other factors that I had to grow up very quickly. But some people, their first job, it can be a completely different experience. And 20 years later, they could be a great employee. And you can apply the same sort of thing to people working on a show when they were a teenager and people that are close to 40 today. I don't think that really Michelle Trachtenberg has much to say on, one, the situation with Blake Lively right now, because, as I said, anything that she says is just going to be picked apart, and there's nothing that she could say that would be a good move for her. But also, she probably hasn't seen Blake Lively or had anything to do with her in nearly 20 years. So I just don't think there's much that the Gossip Girl cast can contribute now, because it seems clear that Blake Lively doesn't have relationships with any of them, and most of them don't seem to have any relationships with each other really at all. When Leighton Meester was on Gossip Girl, as I said, there was this push at a very specific period to kind of make her a pop star, and there was a lot of resources and money put behind this, but it was a bit of a blip. And this was around 2009. She released her first single, Somebody to Love, featuring Robin Thicke, and then her second song, Good Girls Gone Bad. That actually did pretty well. It peaked at number 7 in the US charts. But after that song came out, things took a bit of a turn and it didn't go very well. And she actually ended up recording a whole album that never came out. But in 2014, the year after Gossip Girl ended, she did end up putting out her own album, Heartstrings, not the one that she re-recorded. That one's never been released. And she ended up releasing this on her own label. And I'm not a very big music person at all, but I know a lot of people have had good things to say about this album, and it did get pretty decent reviews from what I saw. There was a period, the few years before Gossip Girl ended and the few years after it did, where she started doing big movies like The Roommate and That's My Boy. The year after Gossip Girl ended, she also got engaged to Adam Brody, Seth from the OC. So it's kind of funny they both worked on shows that were super famous and created by Josh Schwartz and came out within, a year of each other. They got married the following year in February 2014 in a private ceremony, and they had their first child the next year in 2015. They also had a second child in 2020. Around when Leighton was having her kids, she seemed to take a step back from things, and recently she has done a couple of projects, The Weekend Away for Netflix in 2022 and the Apple series The Buccaneers in 2023. But she and Adam Brody seem to be living their best life and doing occasional projects when they want to, but they're still pretty private, which good for them. Sadly, they were victims of the LA fires and their house was completely destroyed by the fires. But this did lead to a lot of their fans supporting them by rallying to watch their shows, stream them, and also stream a lot of Leighton's music, which has caused a resurgence of her songs recently across various platforms. Penn Badgley seems to have made even more of an effort to stay out of the mainstream media and keep things private than even Leighton Meester. And most of what you hear about him or see about him is through his own podcast. Penn Badgley, like Blake Lively, initially turned down his role on Gossip Girl and was hesitant to take it even after he'd gone through some convincing. Prior to Gossip Girl, he'd done some voiceover work for games that came from Nintendo, a couple of Mario games, and appeared on shows like The Young and the Restless and The Bedford Diaries. The year before Gossip Girl, he was in a movie, John Tucker Must Die, with Sophia Bush of One Tree Hill, which I have a video about the behind-the-scenes antics of One Tree Hill. Penn Badgley played Scott Tucker, the title character's brother, and his brother, John Tucker, was played by Jesse Metcalfe from Desperate Housewives, which, as I mentioned earlier, I also just did a video on Desperate Housewives behind-the-scenes antics too. Penn and Blake Lively didn't get on initially, and they did know each other before Gossip Girl. Allegedly, they were in some homeschooling together, and Blake Lively actually has spoken about not wanting to like Penn Badgley and speaking poorly about him to other cast members when Gossip Girl first started, but things changed quickly and Penn and Blake actually began dating. They dated from 2007, like the first season of Gossip Girl, until 2009.
Do you currently have a boyfriend?
See, I don't really like to, if I was doing another job, let's say I was a CEO at a big company, right. you don't bring your personal life to the table, right? You come, you do your job, and you separate the two. Right. If not, people really get into your personal life, and you see all these people out there in these magazines that have opened the doors for that, so they bring them on a red carpet or talk about their life, exactly. And you've invited people in, so you can't expect them not to be in your life. Right.
Both were pretty private about their relationship. Well, that's what they say in interviews. They did end up announcing their relationship in May 2008 when they were on hiatus from Gossip Girl between season 1 and season 2. I shouldn't really say announce, because if you look this story up, it was a story in People talking about how they were in a relationship because the paparazzi caught them together in Mexico, which it's like the most clearly staged paparazzi walk, shoot, whatever you want to call it, that I've ever seen. But they broke up quickly after that. They really didn't date that long. When they broke up, the cast, crew, and producers of Gossip Girl were actually none the wiser that they did break up, and they didn't find out until the season 2 finale that they broke up months before that. According to like People magazine, and if you look up, online, like when did they date, it says they dated 2007 to 2010, and people did have it confirmed by their reps that they were broken up in October 2010, but they actually split way, way before that. They broke up at least the year before in 2009 when the season 2 finale was being filmed, but obviously those quotes didn't come out till years later. That year, 2009 and 2010, Blake had been filming The Town with Ben Affleck, and there's always been rumors that Blake Lively and Ben Affleck were together. There was a rumor that Jennifer Garner actually came down to the set of The Town after hearing whisperings, but obviously, those are allegations. I used to love the show Alias that Jennifer Garner was on, and she has a super interesting career and public persona because a lot of people see her as this like very straight-laced, kind of long-suffering wife of Ben Affleck, and she was raised in a household that was, I believe, very conservative for like dress and hair and women in general just being like very seen and not heard. But she has always dated and married these kind of like bad boy men, and the same way that Ben Affleck has always been rumored to start relationships with women while he's already in a relationship with women, Jennifer Garner has allegedly a similar pattern that also happened with Ben Affleck when they were making Daredevil, and she was married to Scott Foley. Whoever does Jennifer Garner's PR does a very good job, and I think there's a super interesting video to be done about Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck and like all the people surrounding them, like the Blake Lively's and Scott Foley's, and there was a thing with Michael Vartan. He was in between Scott Foley and Ben Affleck, but a lot of the things that are talked about Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner, why I think it would be an interesting video is because so much of the stuff about them doesn't actually circulate in the mainstream media and isn't that talked about. But let me know if that's a video you'd be interested in. One like silly thing about Blake Lively and Ben Affleck that is kind of interesting is if you look into their blind items, there's kind of this story that exists over the years from like way back in 2010, and it's sort of this like story about them being kind of star-crossed lovers and like always longing for each other when they're, you know, at like the Golden Globes or something and like staring across the room. But as I always say, like blind items, you kind of have to take with a pinch of salt. Some are absolutely true, some are absolutely false. So who knows with that one. And obviously much more about Blake Lively when we get to her chapter. So as I said, most places were reporting they dated from 2007 to 2010, but it seems much more like they broke up early 2009 or even the end of 2008. Penn did go on to date Zoe Kravitz for several years. He's done some good movies. A favorite of mine is Easy A, great movie. Like Leighton, Penn has been involved in music too. He fronts a band called Mother, and they released an album called Centerfold. As I mentioned, he also has a podcast, and he's had several former Gossip Girl cast members on to talk about the show and reminisce and just their time on a big show like that. In 2014, he began dating Domino Kirk, and they got married in 2017 and had their first child in 2020. Last year, Penn was also in Ariana Grande's music video, The Boy Is Mine, but his biggest role by far, which eclipses even Gossip Girl, is his role as Joe Goldberg on the hit Netflix show You. You premiered its first season in 2018, and just last month, they premiered the teaser for the first half of the 5th and final season, and that will be out later this year, 2025. The show is about a book manager, Joe, who becomes infatuated with a woman and begins stalking and tracking her. It's a good show, and just like Gossip Girl, it's also based on a book series. Obviously, right now, Blake Lively is one of the most talked about topics on the internet. It actually was kind of difficult, like more difficult than usual, to do research for this video because of the sheer amount of articles and videos and posts and just content regarding the situation that's going on with Blake Lively right now. I will touch on that topic at the end because I think there is a lot more going on here than most people are talking about or that's being put out there. I think that this is such a huge hot topic right now that views, clicks, likes, overall engagement, and therefore money is also something that's very much affecting things and what's being put out and how much is being put out. But I will speak about that later because there just are a few important things to keep in mind. So for some background on Blake Lively, she was actually born Blake Brown, and as I mentioned earlier, she was born into an acting family. Her mother was married previously to Ronald Lively, and while Elaine, her mother, and Ronald were married, they had 3 children, one of which is the actress Robin Lively that I mentioned, who was in Savannah, the WB show, and in Teen Witch, and she was also involved in the movie It Ends With Us, which, as I said, we'll talk about in a minute. But Robin has 2 other siblings, Laurie and Jason, who are also actors. When Elaine and Ronald got divorced, Elaine then married Ernie Lively, who is Blake Lively's father. And you might be thinking, Lively, what are the odds of Blake Lively's mom marrying 2 men that last name is Lively? But Ernie's name isn't actually Lively, it's Ernie Brown, but when he and Elaine got married, he decided to become a Lively because Elaine wanted to have the same last name as her 3 kids, and then she and Ernie had 2 more kids, Blake and her brother Eric. Their birth certificates actually do say Brown, but they've always been Lively. I did see like an interview because I was looking into all the Blake Lively interviews. You spent days and days watching these things, but in one of the interviews, it was like with Ryan Reynolds, and they were talking about how when they got married was pretty much, or even it was maybe a little bit after they got married, that is when he found out that Lively wasn't actually technically her real last name. So that's how little that I guess she doesn't even go by it at all. And I'm sure a lot of people have put together that is why her hair care line is called Blake Brown. Her brother, Eric Lively, is also an actor, and my OG subscribers from my OG channel, all my L Word girlies, will recognize Eric Lively as he is a series regular in season 2 of the L Word, playing a very creepy roommate named Mark. Blake's dad, Ernie, was an actor himself, and her mom was a talent scout, and with her siblings also being actors, Blake spent a lot of time on sets when she was growing up. Her first ever acting role was in a lead role in Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and her real life dad actually plays her dad in that movie and the sequel too. I think this movie is even where you can see Blake kind of developing this other factor. I don't even know really what to call it, because if you look at the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants movies, there's the 4 leads, America Ferrera, Amber Tamblyn, and Alexis Bledel, and Blake Lively, and all of the actresses except for Blake were coming off or involved in pretty significant other projects, and this was Blake's first ever role, and she definitely got the most out of this movie, like attention and career-wise. And while she has gone on to do shows like Gossip Girl, that was like a cultural phenomenon at the time, and other movies like Green Lantern, The Town, and all the stuff that's going on now, A Simple Favor, but it's not as though she's done like massive movies like back to back to back, but she is still a massive star. I know a lot of people like always have this discrepancy about A-list and who's this, who's that. I usually go off name recognition. Like, I think if you showed her picture to 100 people in the street, I think the vast majority of them would be able to tell you her name. And certainly, like, I am practically like the exact same age as Blake Lively. When I think of who all my straight friends like really love, Blake Lively is one of those actresses that if I ask them, what's your favorite Blake Lively movie? What's one of her amazing performances? I don't know whether like right off the top of their head they'd be able to say. They'd probably saying Gossip Girl because it would be the first thing that come to mind. But I feel like a lot of my friends, and this is anecdotal evidence obviously, are going off like her more as a red carpet interview magazine fashion person. And that's why sometimes I think Blake Lively is either someone who was ahead of her time, and don't take that in the wrong way, I'm not saying she's like some sort of genius, or she was someone who, because of the family she was born into, she kind of went into acting. And she does talk all the time in interviews about how she never wanted to be an actor, and basically her brother said, oh, I think you'd be good at it, and she did it. And growing up, that seems to have been what she was mainly exposed to.
Growing up around it made me not want to do it. I had no idea what I wanted to do for a living, but I knew it wasn't acting. But then my brother thought I would love it, and I started doing it, and I did love it. And so it's never, I don't know, it's never really been, the only thing that I learned growing up on sets was how great craft service was.
And I just think that she should have never been an actor. She doesn't seem to like the same things about it that actors do.
Gossip Girl, so she was driving down at nights and back and forth and really stretching it to get her research done. And I was driving around the city. So that's the house Matt grew up in. She said, Matt who? And I said, Matt Damon. She goes, how do you know Jason Bourne?
Are you sure she had no idea?
My eyes. Yeah. I was like, well, we did a movie together.
These kids today, they don't know their history.
But she seems like someone who should have been some sort of really big influencer or something like that, or a lifestyle person, or have some sort of Netflix cooking and all of that sort of thing. And we will talk about her baked goods in a minute, because there's weird stuff going on with the relationships. But I just don't think that acting is something that she's really that passionate about. Obviously, I don't know her. This is just like my own opinion. And I will keep it brief because it is my opinion. I don't like to put too much of that in. But she just is someone who I think that it's more like the celebrity and the attention. And obviously, you know, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, they aren't just successful actors. Like, they have so many companies, they are worth so much money. And I think it's more the whole like fame celebrity package more than actually being an actor. And I think that if she was maybe 5, 7, even 10 years younger, that she might have in her even teen years started some sort of influencer thing and gone down that path, because she really has like the making of it. Because a lot of those like lifestyle influencers, or just people that become influencers, they do come from rich families, because one, who else can dedicate all that time when they're not making any money, but also being able to have the appearance of money before you have money. Her parents, I'm sure, put her up in nice places before she got her sisterhood and Gossip Girl money. And I'm sure she grew up in a very nice house, and, you know, she went to a really prestigious high school and all of that stuff. So I just think that maybe acting wasn't the route for her. But again, I don't know her, so that's just my opinion. The following year, after Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants in 2006, she did a college movie called Accepted with Justin Long.
I didn't know what I was doing half the time. This is my second movie, and I feel like, okay, I'm an actress, but I have no idea what I'm doing. So on my own level, I feel like my own level of rejection, like I don't belong here, I shouldn't be doing this.
And that same year, she did a horror movie called Simon Says that was starring Crispin Glover, and her dad actually produced that and appears in it too, as do her two sisters, Robin and Laurie. The year after, in 2007, she was of course cast as the lead character Serena van der Woodsen in the CW's Gossip Girl. And as I mentioned earlier, she initially turned down the role. As we talked about earlier, Gossip Girl was a pretty good show the first season, but once the original showrunner and producers departed, it turned into something else. But Gossip Girl really did launch Blake Lively's career into being just a well-known star. And especially coming just a year and a half after the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, which was a pretty big movie, especially for like teens and 20-somethings. The Gossip Girl cast was everywhere during this first couple of seasons, and Blake especially started to get a lot of attention for her fashion, and between her individually and the Gossip Girl cast, she seemed to constantly be on magazine covers and being interviewed. I was never someone who was like super drawn to Blake Lively. Like I said, I more preferred Leighton Meester, but she was someone that I always was totally aware of and like what was going on with her from Gossip Girl onwards, because she was someone that was just always talked about. And even late night shows and interviews, lots of magazine covers, and she became very well known for not having a stylist and dressing herself. And over the years, she became this kind of red carpet look darling and developed a pretty big following for her fashion. During the end of season 2 of Gossip Girl, the hiatus, and the start of season 3, she started filming the movie The Town with Ben Affleck. And as I said earlier, there were lots of rumors at the time about her and Ben Affleck, but they've never been confirmed. She was also one of the many young actresses who had her explicit pictures stolen and released online, which was horrendous. And going into the 4th season of Gossip Girl, there was a lot of discussion about Blake Lively and pretty much the whole cast of Gossip Girl, honestly, not wanting to continue with the show, but they were locked into their contracts. These CW shows, they not only tie you down for that 6-year contract, but you're filming 10 months of the year. The shoot days are very long, and especially when the writing isn't there and you're part of a big ensemble cast, a lot of the actors can be frustrated. Blake Lively was more interested in the movie scene, and honestly, I think the fashion scene, than ever any acting interests her. But in 2010, she was cast and shot the movie Green Lantern, which became pretty infamous for how bad it was. And that, of course, was alongside her future husband, Ryan Reynolds, who played Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. This movie was hyped up and supposed to be this big deal for DC. They were trying to get their own success, similar to Marvel, as the Avengers was coming out in 2012. So a lot of, Captain America and Iron Man, it was all building towards that. And they really thought Green Lantern was going to kick off this big success for DC. As most people will be aware, the movie was terrible and it got just torn apart by reviews and in the media. Around this time, Blake and Penn Badgley broke up, and that was while she was shooting Green Lantern. And it was also rumored that there was that situation with Affleck around this time. So 2010 was when Green Lantern was shot, and then it came out the following year in 2011. And that was when Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively had to do all the press and Comic-Con and interviews. And this was right after The Town when it came out in 2010. So the Ben Affleck rumors had been around. She had broken up with Penn Badgley that year before, and Ryan Reynolds, while they were shooting Green Lantern, was married to Scarlett Johansson. And neither Scarlett nor Ryan has ever gone into like a ton of detail about their marriage breaking down, but Scarlett has mentioned a few things and made the odd comment that seems to indicate Reynolds may not have been too thrilled about how big of a star Scarlett was becoming, as at this time she was in the Marvel Universe and shooting Avengers. Ryan and Scarlett got divorced in 2011, the year Green Lantern came out and when they were doing all the press, and Blake Lively was dating Leonardo DiCaprio at this time, and they broke up right around the same time that Reynolds and Scarlett Johansson divorced. When Green Lantern came out, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds were obviously doing all of these press things together, and they did even talk about the chemistry that they had in a lot of the interviews. A year after this is when they claim they got together, and they did the usual PR speak of, oh, we met and then we were great friends for a year and then we got together. It does seem like they are a real Hollywood relationship and not PR, which is honestly not super common. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but it happens. Well, PR relationships happen a lot more than people think. And Ryan and Blake got married the year after they got together in 2012. That was the year after Green Lantern's release. Their wedding was extremely controversial when the pictures came out, especially as they got married on a plantation, which I honestly don't know what they were thinking. There was such backlash that the vast majority of their wedding pictures have been completely scrubbed from the internet. I think the only place you can see them is on Martha Stewart's site because she didn't want to take them down. And they did issue an apology when all of this started coming out. They spoke about how they specifically saw like beautiful locations on Pinterest and how, you know, they made a mistake and all of this stuff. And actually, because they kept specifically saying that they saw pictures on Pinterest, Pinterest changed how they do a lot of wedding stuff, and they don't even allow plantations to post location pictures anymore on the app because of all this backlash. Ryan and Blake have 4 children together, and they are very private about their kids. I don't like discussing people's kids like at all. I never have, even on my original channel. If I do ever have to show like a relevant picture, I will blur the kids' faces, but I prefer just not even to like talk about them. They did kind of have this same policy where they didn't discuss the kids, they didn't talk about their names, they didn't show their pictures, nothing. But then whenever Ryan got his star on the Walk of Fame, they did like a big photo shoot, like the typical Walk of Fame pictures where, you know, it's like a big day and they have the ceremony. I do see this very differently to Ashton and Mila, for example, who recently showed their kids. They showed their kids' faces because they were going through like massive backlash for being best friends with Danny Masterson and writing him a letter of support after he was convicted of multiple violent rapes. And they got even more backlash when everything came out about their other best friend, Diddy. That was the moment that Ashton and Mila chose to show their kids' faces that they said they would never do. And they said, you know, their kids' privacy wasn't theirs to give away, but when they got into major controversy, they did. And not only did they show their faces, they did like lots of publicity around it and brought to them to all these events. I do see Ashton and Mila and Blake and Ryan, like that is a different thing because theirs was like a celebration. It was one day. Yes, the kids were in pictures, but it wasn't the way Ashton and Mila, like everything was centered around the kids. There was even articles being like, they show their faces, like face reveal and all this stuff. And they went to all these like very public events with lots of people around and then did a slew of articles afterwards too. But if you want to know any more about Ashton and Mila or Masterson or Sean Combs, anything like that, I have plenty of videos on the topics. Nobody even knew their kids' names, and they actually were announced in a very big way because they were included in a Taylor Swift song, and they afterwards said, yes, like these are the kids' names. That's why, because Taylor Swift is some of the kids' godparents, and she is like very close to Ryan and Blake. Blake and Taylor are like best friends, so that's how their names were included. One story that has always existed about Blake and Ryan's marriage is that allegedly Ryan is quite controlling of Blake and isn't that keen about her doing tons of projects. And to be fair, she really hasn't done a lot of projects since she married Ryan Reynolds. And for someone who that seemed to be what they wanted was the whole celebrity life and thing, it doesn't quite add up. But she has had 4 kids, so maybe a lot of it is down to that. They do have absolute buckets of money. They have a lot of businesses, so I'm sure that, you know, she doesn't need to do any projects. It's not like, oh, I need to keep up my lifestyle or anything like that. But Blake Lively does seem like someone who liked the whole celebrity life and pictures and red carpets and all of that. So you would think that she would like to be involved in more projects, but it could be the case of doing these drinks and hair care lines and going to the Met Gala and all that stuff. Maybe that is satiating her fine because they have the money. If she wants to go and do red carpet stuff and get pictures taken and do interviews, she can. But it's still, that story has always persisted. And they even have had, like, over the years, a few support type staff that have allegedly said that Blake has to pretty much like run everything by Ryan, and he kind of doesn't want to be outshone by her. But again, that's alleged. There actually were a lot of reports during the last 2 seasons of Gossip Girl that Reynolds really wanted Lively to leave the show, and there were some attempts to get her out of her contract, but this was nearly 15 years ago, so they didn't have, Ryan and Blake didn't have the same like name recognition or power that they do today. One kind of funny thing is that I've always heard that Blake Lively, whenever, you know, she was starting dating Ryan Reynolds or like Leonardo DiCaprio or pretty much anyone, that she kind of woos them with like baked goods, which if you watch like a ton of their interviews, they do always talk about, oh yeah, like Blake was bringing brownies to me and this to me and all of that stuff. And even when Ryan Reynolds was doing Green Lantern and all this crazy diet, she would like stay up and bake all this stuff.
She's not kidding. She says she'd get off set at 1 in the morning and she'd be back over in New Orleans shooting at 6 a.m. and not a single complaint. In fact, sometimes she'd just come on set having just baked mysteriously and curiously a batch of brownies. It was like, you so no sleep at all tonight? Nope. I had to cook these brownies for you that you can't eat, Ryan. Have you seen the soup?
And I tried with all my baked goods to break him, but it didn't work.
It didn't work.
No, we had, you know, the earliest call times and he was up at like 3 in the morning working out. And
anytime I think about that story about her wooing people with baked goods, I just picture her showing up to set in a very 50s style dress with a little picnic basket full of brownies and baked goods. I don't know why that makes me laugh so much, but it does. One other thing I will say that I've always heard about them, and I do know like quite a few people who have worked either on sets with them or have had significant dealings with them, events or some sort of production they've been putting on. I've always heard that they are very nice to staff and fans, and believe me, that is not usual for Hollywood. I do talk about this a lot in my videos, but I don't doubt that 20 years ago, especially during like the Gossip Girl days, I'm sure Blake Lively and the rest of the cast were all probably nightmares. They were 19, 20, 21. You'd like to think that people grow and mature and do start to treat people better, but usually with Hollywood, it goes the complete other direction, where people get more famous, more money. They have spent more times on set and having people do everything for them, and they become even bigger monsters usually as their career goes on, especially if they become a bigger and bigger celebrity. And as I spoke about, the Gossip Girl cast certainly were notorious for all of their antics and behavior behind the scenes and feuds and issues. But from what I've always heard, what's always been reported, what even people posting online that they've had fan encounters, they have always been pretty positive up until this summer. Obviously, I'm eliminating the situation with It Ends With Us because I'll get into that later and what I'm going to do regarding that. But the general consensus that was out there for the last at least 8-9 years has been pretty positive for a Hollywood person anyway. Even back when The Town was being filmed, so like 2010, I know someone who worked on that, and they said Blake Lively would spend a ton of time every day taking pictures with fans and signing autographs, talking to people. And this was like in the later seasons of Gossip Girl, and they were actually filming some of The Town while they were filming Gossip Girl. So she was filming Gossip Girl in New York and then having to go between the Town set in Boston. So it was like a lot of driving, and Gossip Girl, I'm sure they were working like 17, 18-hour days some of the time, and she was probably shooting The Town on like the weekends or something. So that going back and forth, and you're filming 2 things at the same time and you're still making time for people, I mean, that's not usual. Obviously, when I make these videos, I like to include absolutely everything in the sources that I've used to make the video, apart from things like that where it's someone telling me something. But the people that I use are people that I have known for years and years and years, and have 100 other things that they've told me that I know like I can back up or they can back up. And the vast majority always want to be anonymous because they still work in the industry. And anything like the situation with Desperate Housewives, where someone from Desperate Housewives reached out to me, if I don't know them personally, I will always more than vet them. Like the person with Desperate Housewives, they not only gave me their full name, their job title, I could find them on IMDb. They showed me more than enough proof that they were who they said they were. And also I got on video with them and could see their face and match it with IMDb and all that stuff, because I know there's a lot of stuff like that going on with It Ends With Us. And I always do want to be able to give every single source. And I'd love my friends or people I know to sit and say it on camera, but they still work in the industry, and it's, of course, people want to be anonymous because it doesn't look good coming on YouTube and like spilling secrets. But that's why I only ever really include small chunks of that stuff, because everything else I'll always put in the sources. And I did find that there was this video from, or there's actually multiple videos from an autograph hunter. And in case you don't know, there's a lot of people that will like sell autographs online, and they will find where certain celebrities are going to be. So say somebody's going to tape The View, or there's a movie premiere, they'll go and get the person's autograph and they'll sell them. And lots of them will like bring, you know, like glossy pictures. So say it's Blake Lively, they'll bring like headshots of Blake Lively to sign. And a lot of them, what they've started doing is they'll print out like the first page of a script and get them to sign it. Or they'll even get white index cards or like sheets of just like white paper. And a lot of actors have like caught on to this. So if they see like a stack of pictures or they see white index cards, a lot of them won't sign. And of course, like a lot of them even become, maybe not the actors, but like their PR people will become familiar with these autograph hunters. And so like sometimes the handlers or like security or PR person will be like, no, we're not signing. This particular autograph hunter, he has a couple of videos with Blake, and not only does she like come up to him and signs like multiple things for him, she goes back multiple times and signs stuff for him, which that is very rare, especially when actors like see the white cards.
How you been, Blake? Black Radio Man here, Black Radio Man.
Blake.
How you been?
Why you're signing, Blake?
I'm the Black Radio Man. Blakey with the cakey. How you been, girl?
Blake, right here. Blake,
All right.
Blake, one last shot right here.
How you been?
Good. What about
All right. Been maintaining, still living. All right. Mind doing a few more? Please. Publicist. Thank you, publicist.
You're very welcome,
Thank you.
sir.
All right, stay black, everyone. Have a wonderful morning. All right, you all ready?
But she also remembers this guy and asks him like, oh, how he is. And they have like a little back and forth. And I know people will say like, oh, wow, she's being a decent human being a few times, like big deal, or, you know, it's only a few videos. But I'm telling you, this is far from the norm. I'd say half of actors, maybe even more, when you're talking about A-list or like people that are really well known, wouldn't even go out. So a lot of places, like if they're taping the Drew Barrymore show or The View or something, a lot of them will drive in so that they're like in the building already, so the fans or like autograph people can't get to them, or, you know, there's paparazzi and everything. Or a lot of them will just like walk straight through. Some of them will sign, but it'll be like stone faced, just like, you know, with the Sharpie. And you can usually tell the actors that will always sign and always take pictures, because they will always like have like their own Sharpies, because they don't want to like, you know, be taking like tons of people's different Sharpies. And I've seen loads of cases where like someone will accidentally like take someone's Sharpie and go off with it and things. So anytime that I do see Blake Lively signing anything, she always does have like Sharpies, and like her PR person does. And I know this is based on a few people's interaction. You're seeing a few videos. I'm telling you about a few people who have interactions with them, and it could all be fake. They could be awful people that the second that they're away from cameras, like the mask drops. And honestly, that's the case with a lot of Hollywood people. I've seen people be absolute monsters, and then you go online and someone's like, oh, they seem like such a sweetheart, and Yeah, sure. But they are at least nice to staff and fans, which goes a long way in Hollywood because, as I said, that's not the norm. We talked about the wedding backlash already, but after Gossip Girl wrapped, I'd say the other bits of backlash and criticism that she garnered was for her comments about both Woody Allen and Harvey Weinstein, who she had working relationships with both. Woody Allen, she did a movie with him and Parker Posey, and she obviously was very complimentary to him and didn't acknowledge what has gone on with his daughter and everything else that he's done. And with Harvey Weinstein, she ended up saying that she hadn't had that experience with him and she was devastated to hear the stories and that she never heard anything about him. I do find it very hard to believe when really big celebrities will say, oh, I never heard anything about Harvey Weinstein, because how do normal people who are nobodies hear this stuff for years? And I'm not saying like anybody should have known or anything like that, but when celebrities are blatantly saying to the press they never heard anything, it doesn't add up to me. It's like Ashton Kutcher and Danny Masterson. And we are thinking about it in the same way that normal people can totally be friends with a monster and not know anything. That happens all the time. And you find something out about someone that you never would have thought in a million years. But these people are extremely famous. And that stuff, like, it's constantly circulating. And that the Diddy stuff, even if you go back and look at like my videos being released, like you can see I released Ashton and Mila like the day before Diddy was arrested, and certain things like that, because people talk and these things are known, even if it's not being discussed openly in the press and places like that. We do know now there's been so many people that have come out in the industry and said, yes, this was known. This was very talked about, just the same way that people discuss Diddy and Danny Masterson. And you can even go back now and look at old videos, old podcasts, old forum posts, and see people discussing what monsters Danny Masterson, Harvey Weinstein, and Sean Combs were years before anything officially happened and came out in the mainstream media. The biggest project that Blake has had recently, apart from the It Ends With Us stuff, is the movie A Simple Favor with Anna Kendrick. The sequel to this movie is coming out this year, and there were reports from the set that Blake Lively and Anna Kendrick did not get on, which is probably true, but it couldn't have been that bad since they are both doing the sequel and it isn't like either of them are desperate for money or a job. If it really was that miserable, I'm sure they both wouldn't have signed on, or one of them wouldn't have signed on. Also, it pains me to say that from everything I've heard, allegedly Anna Kendrick isn't that easy to deal with either. And a lot of people lately have been discussing the movie poster for A Simple Favor 2, as it just came out like a week ago. And it's the name placement that most people are talking about. On the poster, it has Anna Kendrick's name first and then Blake Lively's name, but Blake Lively's name is sitting like a little bit above Kendrick's on the right side. This is not unusual at all. It's very common if they want to give two actors equal billing. It's basically the way that they're trying to say they're both the stars. And I do talk about stuff like this in a lot of my videos, things like credits and, in the Charmed show, how they were using the credits to kind of like appease people sometimes, because when Shannon Doherty left, they gave the lead spot to Alyssa Milano, but they were blackmailing Holly Marie Combs to keep her on the show. So they gave her and Holly Marie Combs as Piper. They call that the trailer usually in credits. It normally appears at the end. So, for example, in Buffy, you had and Anthony Stewart Head as Giles. When he left the show, the next biggest star, Alison Hannigan, she got that spot. And if you look at a show like Yellow Jackets, which I cover now on my original channel, I do actually plan on talking about the Yellow Jackets credits this week, because there is something that I think is indicating what's going to happen with Hilary Swank in the credits. But if you want to watch that and you like Yellow Jackets, I'll link my original channel below. That show's cast is amazing, but they also have 3 like pretty well-known actresses. So they wanted to give them all equal billing. And so in the Yellow Jackets credits, it's quite unusual. You don't see this tons in TV shows. They have Melanie Lynskey in the top spot. She's the first one. And then at the end, they have with Christina Ricci, followed by and Juliette Lewis. So it's the same thing with movies. I mean, you look at the Avengers poster and they have so many people in it, and obviously like loads of very, very well-known A-listers. And it's why a lot of the time, even people that aren't in a movie ton will like still be on the poster, or I mean, movies like Scream do it more to like play with the audience, but that is a huge thing. And people might see it as like, oh, it's a name on a poster in the credits, but all of that stuff is decided at the contract stage. Blake and Anna Kendrick probably dealt with that like 2 years ago because it all really matters. It's like the whole number one on the call sheet. You know, if you're going on the set of a TV show, the star is number one on the call sheet. And all of that stuff, it sounds really dumb, but it really means a lot. And I don't know this for a fact, but I would bet that equal billing was something that was put into the contract for Blake to say, hey, like come back for the sequel. Because I believe, and I'll asterisk this if I'm wrong, but I believe Anna Kendrick in the first one was given the lead credit and Blake Lively's name followed. So that sort of thing, like I know a lot of people are saying like, oh, well, she must have muscled her way in on this, or she wanted, you know, to this because this is going on. But really, like all of that stuff is like done with lawyers and in contracts. So these things really aren't changed like last minute or anything. And I know there's been like a ton of stuff about the It Ends With Us poster and that topic in general. But as I've said in a few other videos, I am working on a video about the whole It Ends With Us and Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. I just am getting through everything. I understand that some people don't have the time to go through every source or every this or every that. And I want to make sure if somebody is coming to my video to find out what's going on, that I'm telling them the full story and giving them everything I possibly can. I did speak about it on my Patreon last month. We did like an 1.5-hour conversation about the whole situation with Baldoni and Lively and celebrity PR in general and stuff that's going on, because as I said, I think there is so much more going on here than people are talking about or realizing, and especially on forums like Reddit and stuff. I am doing a mega deep dive. I am making my way through everything. I'm going through Blake Lively's amended complaint right now because I've gone through pretty much like the rest of the lawsuits and all of the text messages and the website and stuff. But in case you've been living under a rock, last summer in 2024, there was a movie released called It Ends With Us, and it's based on a book by Colleen Hoover. The movie starred Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, and it was also directed and produced by Justin Baldoni and his production company, Wayfair Studios. The movie did pretty well at the box office, but it didn't get the best reviews. And when the film was being marketed and promoted, people began to notice that all of the cast had stopped following Justin Baldoni on social media. What do I always say? The follow, unfollow is usually a pretty good indication about actors' relationships, especially if there was a follow and then they unfollow. Because yes, a lot of people will say, oh, maybe it was an accident, or maybe they just never followed them. But actors know that their whole, oh, who are they following, who are they aren't, they know fans are watching that sort of thing. It's not like you and me that, yeah, you're following your friends and like some celebrities and stuff. They know that, oh, if I'm following this person, it's kind of an endorsement. And especially if they were following someone and then they aren't, they know fans are going to notice that sort of thing. It sends a message, and that sounds a bit like conspiracy, but honestly, any drama that I have ever known about behind the scenes, I will go and see like on Reddit or somewhere like that, and fans are talking about, you know, oh, so-and-so doesn't like so-and-so and they unfollowed them. And there'll always be people like, oh, it could be a mistake or something. And I know that there is drama. And I'm like, no, these people are right. I'm not saying that's every single one, but I could literally list like 50 off the top of my head where there's drama between actors. And one of the first signs was the unfollow. But that sort of thing, it's not going to be baked into a contract. Like, you must follow this person on Instagram. So that's like sometimes the only control that the actor has, because all the other stuff, it'll be like, you're going to promote this movie, you're going to post this on your social media at this time, and you're going to go to this interview and take pictures here. All of that stuff is decided upon, and people noticed all of that unfollowing. They noticed all the cast wasn't mentioning Baldoni. They noticed that there was a lot of negative press and content about Blake over the summer and into the fall, and it just seemed really icy between everyone. And so people started speaking about it on social media. And then on December 20th, 2024, the New York Times dropped a bombshell article with Blake Lively making very serious accusations against Baldoni through this article. Lively claimed that she experienced sexual harassment from Baldoni on the set of It Ends With Us, misconduct, and she also said that he ended up retaliating against her for bringing up this misconduct and sexual harassment, and that he, enabled by his PR, conducted an all-out war and smear campaign against her over the internet and social media. And ever since this New York Times article dropped, there has not been one moment of peace on the internet since. What I will say is, from what I found, there is a lot more going on here with this case. A lot more. And I want to make sure, as I said, I do my due diligence and read everything, look into everything. I have 2 different lawyers that I'm speaking to because I want to make sure that I'm giving the best information that I can. I promise I'll be back very, very soon with a massive, deep dive, thorough discussion about the lawsuit and everything surrounding it. Not the noise. I think there's a lot of noise going on right now that doesn't really pertain to what the lawsuit is actually discussing and the allegations and the whole situation with It Ends With Us. So that is what we'll be discussing. And if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much as always for watching. Leave MVP in the comments so I can personally thank you. And if you haven't guessed yet who the alleged Gossip Girl is, this is your last chance, because allegedly Michelle Trachtenberg, who played the kind of villain Georgina, allegedly she was known for sharing certain secrets from the set and certain information about individuals from the show. And that was a pretty widely reported thing. So let me know what you think about that. If you want to see Miss G again, and maybe me, consider subscribing. In the description box and pinned comment is all of my social media, G's social media, my Patreon, sources, other channels, everything you could possibly need. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, remember to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.